Hello everyone, I'm Dr. Shabir Parmar and today I'm going to present a short analysis of John Keats' poem The Eve of St. Agnes. So let's start. Here you can see the major poets of the Romantic age. When we talk the major poets of the Romantic age, we have William Wordsworth and Samuel Taylor Coleridge, and they belong to the first generation of Romantic poets. Then we have Lord Byron, P.B. Shelley, and John Keats. So here they belong to the second generation, second group of Romantic poets. In this video lecture, I will shortly explain the poem that is the Eve of Saint Ignace. So it might inspire you to read this poem and understand in a detail. Now let us look at the features or characteristics of romantic poetry. As we have seen, these all the poets of romantic age, we can see that there is a breaking the convention. When we look at the romantic poets, all the poems have many common all these characteristics, but they differ in their style. Like Wordsworth wrote about the poems about the nature, while the Coleridge wrote about the supernatural. Mostly, the poetry of Samuel Taylor Coleridge, it has a supernatural elements. So likewise, you can see. So breaking the convention is a main feature of romantic poetry, that they started with the publication of lyrical ballads. We see that they broke the tradition which was earlier, like classicism or neoclassical way of writing poems. Secondly, you can see imagination, dream, or ideal words. Yes, this is very interesting and important characteristics of romantic poetry. Imagination was in the heart of romantic poets. So the ideal world, the world like a dream. So they want to create a world which is full of imagination, and you see that the dream and ideal world. So that is you will see almost in all the poems of romantic poetry. Depiction of nature, yes, it is again a very common characteristics of romantic poetry. Nature, yes, they have created or they have uh, shown us a different perspectives through which we can see the nature. So for Wordsworth, for Coleridge, for Shelley, for Keats, they have explored the beauty, the innocenceness of nature. So nature, again, there is a long discussion, but we will see these all characteristics to just understand what are the main features of romantic poetry. Emotionality versus rationality. When we look at the romantic poetry, we see that they are more emotional, they are subjective and emotional. So rationality you will find, particularly in modern poetry, we see that again there is a shift in the modern era. So modern poetries, they belong to the group of such people that they depicted or they highlighted the emotions in a way. And love for medievalism, that is also a very common characteristics of this era. We see that romantic, in the romantic poetry, the knights and medieval atmosphere in one or another way. And again we will see the most of the characteristic here in this particular poem also. And individualism, that is again the romantic concept, and then how these romantic poets came out with the concept of individualism. So these are the common characteristics of romantic age. John Keats, heard melodies are sweet, but those unheard are sweeter. Therefore, a soft pipe play on. Read these words, just feel the lines, the words, how they are arranged, how they are put in a very beautiful way. Again, you see the thing of beauty is joy forever. It is also by John Keats, and beauty is truth, truth, beauty, that is all. So, John Keats lived a very short life, but he made a tremendous contribution in the field of poetry, particularly in the Romantic age. John Keats' life from 1795 to 1821, he lived a very short life. So I will emphasize here slightly because we need to understand the poet. Like John Keats, he lived a very short life. During his lifetime, when we look at a, not as a poet, John Keats, but as a person, we see that there are many challenges, and we see that he lost his parents at the early age. Suffering, loss, financial problems, they become crucial in the life of John Keats. And even he left his medical study. So, as a person, we see that Keats was disturbed. His entire life, we can see chaos, and we see that every step, we see there are problems. And as I told you again, he belonged to the second generation of romantic poetry. Kids found solace and comfort in art and literature. Now here the from art from a man to an artist, from a person to a great poet, the journey begins. Because for him he finds that poetry there is a some solace, or we can say that he finds comfort in art and literature. And therefore as a poet, we see there is a different kind of John Keats. He has not, we can see that his entire life, if we judge him by from his life and from his poetry, there is a great change. His famous poems, as all of you see, Endymion, La Belle Dame Sans Mercy, Ode on a Grecian Urn, Ode on a Melancholy. So these are the famous poems and famous odes by John Keats. And the Eve of Saint Ignace. It is a narrative poem. So now let us look at the poem. Now what do you see here? You see the pictures. In one picture, you see there is one old man who is performing some religious rituals. In the second picture, you see a lady. Uh, the lady is searching, or she is looking something, or she is in search of something. And in the third picture, you see that the lady and one young man, and it seems like some party or some function, and they are trying to go somewhere. So this is the gist of the poem. The poem from the beginning, from old men's rituals to the elopement of these lovers. So the entire story is from the beginning to the end, which can be described through these pictures. But let us look at somehow try to understand the poems more closely. The Eve of Saint Ignace, as the title mentions here. So Saint Ignace, it is about Saint Ignace, is known as a virgin martyr from Rome, 4th century. Yes, and the picture you see is the picture of Saint Ignace. So actually, the poem is not about Saint Ignace. That is first thing. The poem describes the night, or the describes the eve where there is some rituals, and the rituals is like that Saint Ignace, she became martyr. She is known from for her chest and uh, purity. So again you see the picture with a lamb. So the name become associated with Latin Agnes, that is lamb, chest or pure. So Saint Ignace is described as a pure, chest, and like a lamb. And people worshipped on the eve of Saint Ignace. They worshipped, and particularly women. they worshipped. There are some rituals are performed because they believe that she is a symbol of love. And when any uh, woman performs, any lady performs such rituals, she gets a perfect partner in her dream. And that is what the short story about the Saint Ignis. Now the poem which John Keats wrote, it is written in 1819 and it was published in 1920. Here we should keep this point in mind. The eve falls on 20th January, the feast day on the 21st. Okay, so on every 20th January, this is the kind of the people celebrate, and the entire atmosphere is created to worship the symbol of love, the symbol of purity, and that is Saint Ignis. It is a romantic narrative poem, as I told you, and it is written in 42 Spenserian stanzas. So it is a narrative poem and it is written in a Spenserian stanzas. So these are the details which we should know about the particular poem. Now these are the characters. Through these characters we can understand the plot of the poem. See, there is a character like Madeline, who is the heroine of this particular poem. Madeline hopes she will dream of her future beloved. She is devout and she follows the superstitious rituals carefully. When she awakens, she finds a man, that is a Porphyro, in her room. Her professes affections, and ultimately she lives with him, since the discovery of his presence in her room would end badly for all parties. So Manlin is a heroine, and basically she is in love with one young man, that is Porfirio. But we can understand by reading the poem that their love is disturbed by the other people, particularly the father of Madeline, and he never wished that she should marry with Porphyro. Again, Porphyro, that is Madeline's lover, Porphyro is aware that Madeline's father would not be pleased to find him in pursuit of Madeline. That is, there is a problem. So when there is a love, there are some disturbance, and he enlists the aid of an old female servant, that is Angela, to lead him to Madeline's room, where he watches her disrobe and sleep. He wakes her, professes him affections, and ultimately steals away with her into the freezing night. So that is what the two main characters, when we see, one is a Madeline and another is a Porphyro. Both love each other, but due to the some social restrictions, and they are not able to unite. Angela, as I told you, she's a old woman and Madeline's nurse and Porphyro's friends, and ultimately she helped um, Porphyro to find out Madeline, and that is what her role is. Beadsman, that is what the first picture which I show you, the old man who is paid to pray for others. As the poem opens, he is praying in a cold, deserted church. Yes, the atmosphere, when we see the poem, you will find that there is a cold night, and the bedesman is in a church. He is performing some rituals. He is paid for that. And why all these rituals are conducted? Because there is a eve of Saint Ignis, and there is a baron who is Madeline's father. He is hosting a party, and we see that the father of Madeline is hosting a party on the eve of Saint Ignace. So these are the main characters. Through these characters, we can highlight the short summary of the poem, so we can understand in a way. Now, as I told you, that when we look at the poem, when we try to understand the poem in a very short way, we see that the poem begins with the feast, which on a chilly night, the atmosphere is a very cold. When we look at the poetry of John Keats, we will find some of the characteristics, and Keats was a master of using and managing, or we can say that arranging the words. So with atmosphere, you will clearly see like a pictures. When we read the poem, we see the pictures uh, that coming to our eyes. So it begins with the feast on a chilly night, and at the same time, beadsman is performing rituals. At one way, there is a religious atmosphere, and on the second, when we see the binary or when we see the contrast, because in this poem we will see, we know that there are lots of contrast. So at one time there is a religious rituals is going on, and on other hand there is a love that the lovers they are trying to unite. So Madeline's eagerness to perform rituals. Now, Madeline also wants to perform these rituals because the rituals is like that the lady that they have to go in their room. There is some kind of arrangement, and they have to go in the sleep. And while in the sleep, they see their lover. So that is what the rituals. And now this dream becomes reality that Porfirio, to whom she is wishing, he secretly arrives there, and there is a soulful meeting of Medling and Porfirio. So that is what they see, and finally their elopement. So with their elopement, there is a victory, and the victory of love. There is a sense of we can say that happiness, which we see at the end of the poem. These are the few points which we should look at when we read the poem, like the title, how the title, as I explained, the Eve of Saint Ignace, what is the connection of Saint Ignace with the particular poem, how the rituals and everything is going on. And the important another feature is about the important point is the medieval setting. The entire poem is situated in medieval atmosphere, the church and the atmosphere, the nights, and all these things. We see that the poem is full of medieval atmosphere, which is also one of the characteristics of Romantic age. Form and meter, as I told you, that poem is written in Spencerian stanzas. So that is what another point. Imagery and symbols. They are very kids use very particular and meaningful imageries and symbols in these particular poems. Themes, as I told you, that at one way there is a religious atmosphere, and the love, which is the entirely we can see at the end that the love wins at the end. And the poem is a romantic poem, how the poem contains all the major characteristics of Romantic age. Now, when we see this particular poem, and as a poet, John Keats, we can highlight few characteristics of John Keats, like Hellenism, that is his love for Greeks. In some of the poems, we see that Keats was highly fascinated by the Greek art culture, and that is what we see that how he uh, admires the beauty of the ancient Greeks. Nature. Yes, even in this particular poem, we see that the nature is very well described with his beauty, with the atmosphere. Yes, somehow we can see there is a supernatural touch. The night, the atmosphere, the all, and the other things which when we see, when we read the poem, we will see the different kind of nature. And another important feature, that is beauty. See, the entire poem, the art and beauty, love for art and beauty, it is in a core of Keats' poetry. And this poem is also, or as a Keats as a poem, we see that sensuousness is a quality of John Keats, where when we read the poem, our senses are evoked. The sense of touch, the sense of smell, the sense of we can say that all the senses, five senses to sense of the sight, these all the senses are evoked. Language and romanticism, these are the other elements which we can mark in this particular poem also. So John Keats, who worshipped beauty, who finds that poetry has a medium, poetry can transform the human life, and for that he has crafted the poem beautifully. The entire poem, when we look at from the atmosphere, the binaries, the language, the affection, all these things, the poem is very well crafted. When we look at the story is very simple to understand, but how it is planned and how it is framed in particular poem, that is very interesting thing. This is the first stanza. Is just I want to highlight the first stanza. When we look at the rhyme scheme and other things, just read the first stanza. You will find the pictorial quality, the atmosphere of the night, and the kid's ability to depict the nature, supernatural, sensuousness, all these things. So this is of the first stanza. Saint Ignis Eve, a bitter chill it was. The owl for all his feathers was cold, the hare limped, trembling through the frozen grass, and silent was the flock in woody fold. Numb were the beadsman's fingers while he told his rosary and while his frosted breath, like pious incense from a censer old, seemed taking fright for heaven without a death, past the sweet Virgin's picture while his prayers he said. So in the first stanza, you see the night. It was a bitter, chill night. The entire atmosphere was frozen. So in this frozen atmosphere, in this coldness is symbol of death. So there is the entire thing all here. When we look at this particularly stanza, we find the beautiful imagery, pictorial quality, and on the other hand, we see in this cold night, one person, that is old man, beadsman, is performing the duty. Why is performing the duty? Because it is the eve of Saint Ignace, and they are having some rituals. And now the poem, as the poem goes on, so this is what about the entire poem. I have just tried to explain the short idea or short summary of the poem. This poem is having multiple meanings when we look at its structure, its pictorial quality, sensuousness, or erotic description, where it's a very particularly describe some of the scenes, and finally the religious and atmosphere, a religious concept and rituals and medieval atmosphere, and at the end, the victory of love. So these are the few things I tried to explain you in my way. These are some of the references. I hope that this lecture might be useful, and it will motivate all of you to read and to understand this poem more closely. So thank you so much. Thank you so much again.